Hello and welcome back to Programming with Python. In our last session, we have learned how to use loops like for and while loops in Python. In our today's session, let's continue the discussion on loops and build a real-world application. Now, an important concept to understand in loops is the usage of else statement along with the loops. So to understand it, let's take a simple example of printing odd numbers between 1 and 10. So first of all, let's initialize the variable I to 1 and let's use the while loop. So we have to type in the while keyword followed by the condition, right? So let me specify the condition as I is less than or equal to 10. And within this while loop, I'll give the instruction of printing the variable I. And we know that we have to update this variable I, or else our program runs into an infinite loop. Hence, let's update this variable I as I is equal to I plus 2. Now what this program does is that it will print odd numbers between 1 and 10 because this variable I is getting incremented by 2, right? So if the value starts with 1, the next value that this I takes is 3, 5 and so on. Now to use the else statement, we have to type in the else keyword outside of this while loop and then pass in the instructions that you want within this else statement. Here I'll pass in a single instruction to print in else statement. Now let's run this and check the output. So we get the output as the odd numbers between 1 and 10 and also this in else statement, which means the instruction inside this else statement also got executed. Now you might wonder, why can't I write this print instruction outside of this else statement? That is, why can't I write this print instruction like this? And yes, we can write it. Now if we observe the output, we do get the same output. But the main difference of writing the instruction within the else statement is that now if the program breaks out of this while loop prematurely, that is, if the program breaks out of this loop without the complete execution of the loop, then the instructions inside this else statement will not get executed. Whereas if you write these instructions outside of this else statement, those instructions will get executed no matter what happens within the loop. Right? So the main difference is that if the program breaks out of the loop without the complete execution of the loop, then the instructions inside this else statement will not get executed. So to better understand with an example, let's say if my variable I reaches the value 7, then let's break out of this loop. Now I know that whenever my variable I reaches 7, my program will break out of this loop. Right? So as my program is breaking out of the loop without the total completion of this loop, the instructions inside this else statement will not get executed. So now let's check if that is the output that we are getting. So if we observe the output, we got it as 1, 3 and 5, but not this instruction inside this else statement. Right? So this is how we use else statement with the while loop. Now the usage of else statement with the for loop is exactly the same. So let's take this same example. So to use the for loop, we have to type in the for keyword followed by the variable that you want to use, and then we have to specify the range of values this variable j can take. So to specify it, we'll use the keyword in and then the range function. And inside this range function, we have to specify the starting and the ending values that this j will range upon, right? So I'll specify it as 1 as my starting value, and I'll specify my end value as 11 because this 11 is not included, and then I'll print j, right? But we have to print only the odd numbers, right? Which means my j has to be incremented by the value of 2. By default, it will be incremented by 1. So to change that, within this range function, I will type in the value, the increment value as 2. Right? So now this program prints the odd numbers between 1 and 11. Now to use the else statement along with the for loop, all we have to do is type in the else keyword outside of this for loop and then pass in the instruction that you want within this else statement. So here I'll say in else statement. Now let's run this and check if the output is similar to the while loop. So if I run this, I'll get the same output as with the while loop, right? So now if I break out of this for loop prematurely, That is, let's say whenever my variable j reaches 9, let me break out of this loop. Right now, as this program breaks out of this for loop without the complete execution of the for loop, the instruction inside the else statement should not be executed. Now let's check if that is the case. So we observe that the output is only 1, 3, 5 and 7, but not the instruction inside this else statement. So this is the usage of else statement along with the while and the for loop. Right now, so far we have understood quite a few concepts like variables and how to store different types of data within the variables, and also how to take the input from the user and the decision control statements and the loops. Right now, let's use all of this knowledge to build a real world application. Now, most of us have mobile phones and we have set passwords to it. Right now, whenever we enter the correct password, the device will be unlocked. And if we enter the wrong password, the device requests us to enter the password again. And we will have a fixed number of attempts to enter the correct password. Now, if we exhaust all those attempts, the device will be logged for some period of time, isn't it? So let's try to build this simple application and see if we can put our knowledge to good use. So first of all, let's set the password of our device as 12345 @ and now let's request the password from the user. So to do that, we'll be using the input function and I'll request the user to enter the password. Now, once the user enters the password, we have to compare this password entered by the user to the password set, isn't it? Now, if both of these passwords match, that is, if password entered by the user is equal to the password set by the user, then we have to unlock the device. So the device is unlocked. Else, we have to request the password from the user again, right? Which means I have to repeat this instruction. So I'll take the password from the user again, and after taking the password from the user again, I have to compare it with the password set by the user, which means I'll be repeating this instructions again. So if the password matches, then the device will be unlocked. Else, I have to ask the user to enter the password again. Right, and I will do so for the number of attempts that we allow it. Right, so let's fix the number of attempts, let's say as 3. Right, so which means we have to do it for 3 times. Now if the user enters the incorrect password for 3 times, then we have to make sure that the device is logged for, let's say, 30 minutes. Right, so now if you observe these instructions, right, the password entered by the user and the comparison of this password entered by the user to the password set, right, all these instructions are being repeated. Right, so there is no point of writing these instructions over and over again. Instead, we can just use a loop. Right, so here let's use the while loop. So let's take a variable I and initialize it to 1, and then to use the while loop, I will specify the while, and then we have to type in the condition here. The condition is to make sure that the value of this I is less than or equal to 3. That is the number of attempts that the user can enter the correct password. Right, so here we have to request the password from the user. Now if the password matches, the device will be unlocked. Right, if the device is unlocked, there is no point of staying in this loop, right, which means we have to break out of this loop. But if the passwords doesn't match, then we have to print the message that the password is incorrect. Right, so let's say incorrect password, and then let's increment the variable I by 1. Right, and once this variable is incremented, now it will go back to the next iteration. Right, now that happens only if the passwords doesn't match. Right, which means these instructions will get repeated or executed again. Right, now or else, right, once the let's say the user enters the incorrect password for all the 3 attempts, then we have to log the user out of the device. So let's say the device is logged for 30 minutes, right? And this instruction should be executed only if the passwords doesn't match, right? If the passwords match, this instruction should not be executed. So to do that, we will be using the else statement. So I'll type in the else keyword and place this instruction inside this else statement, right? Now, if the password entered by the user, if it matches the password set by the user, we will be breaking out of the loop without the complete execution of the loop, and then this statement will not get executed, right? So now let's check the output. So first, let's enter the correct password. Let's say 12345 @ and then we got the message as device is unlocked. Now let's run it again and let's enter the incorrect password. Let's say 123. Let's again, so we got the message as incorrect password and it is asking us to enter the password again. So let me enter another incorrect password. Again, the same message as incorrect password. And now let's enter the incorrect password again, right? So now that the 3 attempts have been completed, we got the message saying that the device is locked for 30 minutes, right? So this is how you can use the concept that you have learned to build some real world application. So let's continue this journey of building some fun applications in our next session. Thank you.